Prepping your paper to make a Blobs book. First of all, this is super concentrated liquid watercolor. It needs to be mixed with water or it will be too dark for your paper. You want to choose two colors that will mix together well on your paper. I'm using yellow and blue. First, put a few drips of watercolor in your mixing tray. Remember, you're mixing this with water, so I'll have 4 times more paint than what I put in my cup. So I don't want to waste the paint, and I don't need very much. Be careful, this paint may not wash off your clothes. My next step is to very small, at the end of my sheet of paper, write my name so that I can find my paper tomorrow when I come back to art class. Then I'm going to put water into the watercolor paint that I just put in my tray. You'll see that I continue to add more and more color because I'm adding more and more water. Remember, this was concentrated. I'm still going to have nice vibrant color on my sheet of paper. Now, what I want to do is have blobs on my paper. So I'm going to be painting so I have big splotches. Those big splotches are what will allow me to find animals and creatures later in my project. So I want to make sure that I'm not painting anything particular, and you can see that I can mix these colors together. But I also want to make sure that my spots are not too small. Spots that are too small will not allow me to find the creatures that need to be a part of my project later on. So I want to make sure that my blobs are big enough and have enough variety of color that I'm going to be able to find something. I also want to make sure that I have a certain amount of white space. If my paper gets too full, it will also be hard to see what's in those blobs. So I'm just going to continue along my sheet of paper until my paper is fairly full. I can tip my paper so that my paint runs a little bit and I have lines of color. I can also use paper towel. I can use the paper towel to blot up some of the color so that my blobs have variety. So I want to take paper towel so that it has a lot of texture or folds. It's these textures or folds that will give my paint texture. I'm going to set them down gently into my paint, making sure not to push out the texture because I want that texture to be in the paint. This absorbs some of the paint and leaves some of the paint on my paper. This will give my creatures later when I finish my project a nice variety of color. Want to make sure that my blobs have variety. I want to make sure that my blobs are big enough to draw from. A lot of little splatters and too many lines and no white space make this project really hard to complete later. So I want to make sure that I leave enough white space, that my blobs have a variety of colors so that I have something to draw around later on, and that I don't do too much splashing or too much dripping because that is challenging to complete the project with.